There we go, and we're live.
Excellent.
So I don't think we have any viewers yet, but we'll wait like a minute or so just for people to join, see if we get anyone.
No, then you can just have the recorded
Yep,
interview for later.
that's exactly what I'm thinking. Check out this mug that Chris and Leah got me.
That's great. That's great.
Yep. I got some tea in it right now. Oh, it looks like we got one viewer on. So whoever's jumping on, we're just waiting about a minute here just to get a couple people to join. And then, of course, we'll post this after it's done live. We'll post it for people to view. So don't expect a ton of people on, but yeah, I'm in. We got 3 viewers. I'm in California and Steven's in Washington. So this is actually kind of a nice way for us to catch up too.
Yeah.
All right, so we will go ahead and get started. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to my YouTube channel here. I think I mentioned in one of the videos, the whole goal of this is I plan to interview people in the STEM careers or professions over time, science, technology, engineering, math, and that includes, of course, actuaries, which is what I am, and that's kind of the focus of the channel, but really it's people in all those kinds of fields. So my first guest tonight is an experienced software engineer in the industry. He is also taught at the university level and is currently an entrepreneur and has done quite well doing that. So he's got a ton of expertise, and he's my very own brother, Steven Johnson. So Steven, welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Yep. So before we jump into like everything you're doing right now, I thought we'd kind of back up. I just wanted to find out a little bit about your background for people to kind of hear about you. So my first question for you before we start is, or before we kind of get to what you're doing now, is how old were you when you got interested in computer science, and what kind of caused that?
I was in 7th grade. So I don't know how old I was in 7th grade. It was a long time ago. In 7th grade, I took a programming class. My junior high actually had a programming class, which is rare. And so we wrote code on an Apple IIe, and it was a ton of fun. And so that's what got me interested in it. And then in
wow, I didn't realize it was in 7th grade.
In 9th grade.
See, I'm his brother, and I'm learning new things too.
In 9th grade, in my algebra class, I realized I could program my HP calculator. And so I spent 9th grade in math class trying to program solitaire, and it was the worst grade I've ever gotten in math.
What grade did you get in that class?
A B.
Oh. See, he's done well in math.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed math, and but that particular semester, all I did was write code.
That's awesome. Do you still have that Do you have that program on your calculator still?
No. And what I did was, you could have typed it on a computer, but I sat in the back of the class literally going, like the old school 8, 1, 1, 1, 1 to get to C, and then yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so the next question for you is, where did you go to undergrad?
I started at Arizona State University and then transferred to University of Portland.
And then you got your master's as well. So what was it that caused you to want to get your master's?
I didn't want to keep working. That's a bad answer.
No, it's not. This is what we're here to talk about. This is what we want to hear.
I enjoyed programming, but I didn't really enjoy my job. So at the time, I thought I wanted to get into teaching. So I thought I'd get a master's, see about getting a PhD, and go into teaching, which I ended up in teaching in a very roundabout way.
Yes, that's awesome. So like while you were in school, what was your favorite class, and what like really got you going?
I think compilers was my favorite class in school. Compilers was a ton of fun. I still enjoy languages. My research was all in computer languages. I enjoy computer languages, and writing a compiler was really fun.
That's awesome. So what, like for people that are watching, can you explain a little about what compilers are?
Oh yeah. So a compiler takes a computer language and translates it into a machine language. So your actual CPU on your computer does not run the computer language that you type code in. You have to run it through a compiler that will translate that code into a machine code.
Okay. Interesting. So that's kind of high level of compilers. I'm sure there's a ton that goes into that.
Yeah.
Okay. So since I know you kind of left work to go to school, and you really kind of went into computer science in school, but what would you tell people in terms of how beneficial school is for work, and how necessary do you think it is compared to all the information that's out there today? And what are your thoughts on that?
It's like a really good question. So first of all, education is the most important thing you can have. You don't always have to go the traditional route, in my opinion.
Yes.
There's a lot of routes to get that education. Now, it does depend somewhat on your career field. So some career fields require certain levels of certification. And depending upon that, if depending on how you're getting certified, you may need to have a degree for your career field. But for like myself with computer science, that wasn't something that I needed, although the degree really gave me a good foothold with the theory. So today you can go to boot camps. There's a lot of boot camps out there. They're great to get you up and running with writing code, but they leave a lot out. So if you do a boot camp, if you go a different route, or if you learn online, you need to make sure you continue learning, because the science of computer science is really, really important.
Yeah.
And a lot of the boot camps overlook that. They get you to become a programmer, so you're a coding monkey, but you really need to learn the science to really advance in the career.
Totally. No, that makes sense. So if someone's kind of trying to learn it on their own, you feel like they really need to learn a lot of the theory. And do you feel like the best way to do that is through doing projects themselves, or what types of things? If someone really doesn't want to go back to school or is really motivated to learn on their own, what types of things would you recommend they do?
I think it depends on your learning style. And so that's the advantage of doing it on your own. So my learning style is dive into doing something and then learn it. So for example, in my math classes, I would never read the math chapter. I would just jump straight to the end and start working on the problems. As soon as I got stuck, I'd go back and read the chapter to figure it out. So I needed a problem to have context. Other people don't learn that way. Some people learn by reading first. Some people don't learn by reading at all. They need to watch videos. Some people need, somebody looking over their shoulder and actually sitting down with them and showing it to them. So I think you have to understand your learning style and then do whatever makes sense. So if you're like a hands-on learner like myself, you need to dive into a project, get stuck on something, and then don't just when you're stuck on something, don't just hammer out some code and think it's going to work. Go and learn some theory to find a good way to solve that problem.
Yep. I mean, that I think applies to other fields as well, not just computer science, because I've found the same thing in actuarial and the type of work that I've done a lot of that. I mean, I've done some programming as well, not as much as what you've done, but I've found that same thing in my field. It's like you can code or you can work on a problem until you're blue in the face, but if you don't really understand it, you're kind of not going to get anywhere.
So it's called, at least in my field, it's called just-in-time learning. That's what a lot of people do. And that is, you just keep pushing forward and then you learn just as you need it.
Yeah, that makes sense. By the way, listeners, I think you can comment on here. I'm not sure. This is my first time using YouTube Live, but if you have any questions or things you want to jump in with, you can let us know. I did just get a comment that there's a little bit of feedback from my speaker, so I turned it down. I'm hoping that'll work. Next time I'll probably use headphones, but I don't want to ruin this right now with trying to figure that out. So hopefully the feedback's not as bad right now. So I wanted to kind of jump into, after you went to school, what was your first job? And I kind of want to know what your daily life was like, and because we want to find out, with interviewing various professionals and trying to help people get an idea if they're interested in this kind of field, what what did you do on a daily basis, and what did your life look like in terms of like the basics things like breakfast, lunch, how, like what kind of space you worked in and those types of things?
So you want my first job like after I got done with my master's degree, or just after I got done with undergrad?
Undergrad, your very first career job.
So for that, I worked at a company called Tektronix that does testing instruments. And I worked in their manufacturing plant on code for the assembly line. So while we had some very fun and challenging problems to solve in that space, it was not something that I went to work every day just loving. I did enjoy writing the code. Like I enjoyed trying to solve the problems. But manufacturing was just not really what I wanted to do. So my life was go to work, go to my cubicle, sit in my cubicle for 4 hours and write code. Go to lunch, sit in the cubicle for another 4 hours and write code and go home.
And did you have very many meetings there, or was it mostly just coding?
We had a few, but not a lot. It was a lot of coding. And don't get me wrong, I love to code. It just wasn't a problem space that I particularly was interested in. There's some really fun, challenging problems, especially some routing problems. Because they weren't just a straight line assembly line. There's some really fun routing problems. They weren't the problems that I wanted to solve. And there's people that do whole PhDs on this stuff. That just love it. So, but it wasn't the field for me.
So how many companies did you work at before you started teaching?
Well, I guess 4.
And progressing through those companies, I know you worked for a few small companies. What was your favorite company to work at, and why? Was like, for someone who's interested in software engineering and kind of maybe has your type of style that likes that kind of thing, what was it that really got you excited at a company?
So I had two companies that I worked for that I enjoyed probably about the same, but for different reasons. Well, I guess similar reasons. One was called Olive Tree Bible Software. I worked there for almost 10 years. Another one was Crossway. They're the publisher of the ESV Bible. And what I like about that was I was really behind the mission of both companies, and they were products that I used myself. So some people in computer science love solving really hard, challenging problems. But what I found is I don't particularly like solving the hard problems as much as I like writing software that I personally use.
Totally.
And figuring out where you fall in that, in college, I thought I was I enjoy solving hard problems camp. But that's not actually what I found that I enjoyed. I like working on software that I personally use. At Olive Tree, it was what I really enjoyed there also was that I had a large role in what was going into the software, how we were doing things. I was doing stuff in marketing. I was doing stuff in helping support sometimes. It's kind of all over the board. And so I had a lot of different roles that I played. And that's typically not something that people in computer science enjoy doing, but I found that I really liked it.
That's awesome. So yeah, it's stuff that you were like actually passionate about. And I know you told me before, like when you were hiring people in the interview process, a lot of it was trying to find out how passionate the people were about really kind of what you were doing, as opposed to just, are you a good coder?
Yeah. Finding out there, like if they actually cared about our mission and what we were doing was huge in the interview process.
Yep. That makes sense. Yeah, I think I think it's important to find an industry that you're really passionate about and interested in, as opposed to just seeking out something that you're just good at, like a skill that you're good at.
Yeah, definitely. And I think also that takes some self-realization of kind of realizing what kind of problems you like to solve, realizing, just kind of what work environment you like, because like I worked at a small startup, and that is definitely not for everyone. Some people hate it because it's higher risk. It's there can be more stress. At the same time, there's a lot more excitement. You get to do a lot more things. You have a huge voice in what's going on. You're not just another cog in the wheel. So it really, you kind of have to realize what it is that you like, because it's going to be different for different people. And a lot of times you're not going to know that until you get out and start working.
Yep, I believe that. So after you worked at these companies, you went into teaching, what was it that really propelled you into that? You had a master's already, so you kind of had the ability to go into that. But what was that motivation?
The motivation was to start my own, well, to build my own business. So
Yep.
I said, originally I got my master's thinking I might go get a PhD to teach, and then decided not to go that route. So 2 years prior, so I guess actually 4 years prior to teaching, I had started working on an app of my own. 2 years prior to teaching, I had launched that app. It took me, there's a lot of things I would do differently if I was starting a business now, but anyways, that's how long it took me to get there. So I had an app that was growing, but it was not able to support a family yet. And so 1 week before classes started at Whitworth, I got an email saying that they were still looking for a full-time adjunct professor and wondering if I would be interested. At that point, they were desperate, and they were basically like, if you have a master's degree, you can come on. So I decided to just go for it. And it freed me up about 20 hours a week to be able to work on my business. And the other 20 hours a week I spent teaching, preparing for class, grading, doing those things.
That's awesome. And so you had summer breaks really to kind of dive into your business type things.
Yeah. And it freed up a lot of time.
You were also naturally gifted as a teacher. I know that you explain things really well. Do you find, I know kind of the goal was your business, but just kind of jumping into that type of career, what would you say were the positives and negatives of teaching?
So positives, I mean, teaching is fun. I absolutely love standing up in front of the class and teaching. It's a blast.
Yep.
I really, really enjoyed it. I also like the fact that you have a lot more control over your own schedule. So basically there was 12 hours a week that I had to be somewhere, and the rest of my week was up to me. So I was typically teaching 12 credits a week. So those 12 hours I had to be somewhere. The rest of my week, it didn't matter if where I was. Of course, I had to have office hours too. So I guess it was more like 15 hours a week that I was there. And so I loved that. Like, I liked the fact that the rest of the week was up to me, how I wanted to spend it, what I wanted to do with it. I didn't have a particular set time that I had to do class prep or anything like that. So I really enjoyed that part. I liked interacting with the students. That was all fun. Now, the part that I found that I didn't like, which I didn't even realize this until after I started, was I also did not like the fact that I had to be somewhere at an exact time every single day.
Yep.
So I'd gotten used to, working at small companies, working at startups. We basically had a flexible start time. It was, you just had to be at stand up by, I think we had 9 o'clock or something. So I'd try to get to work 7:30, 8 o'clock. But if I was having a late morning, I show up at 8:30. If I was having an early morning, show up at 7. Your morning time was just really flexible. And then once you're there, okay, yeah, you had meetings at a particular time, but it wasn't like you're trying to run out the door to be somewhere at a set time.
Totally.
And I realized that I really didn't like having to clock in, so to speak, at a 9 o'clock class and have to be there right at 9. It wasn't because I didn't want to wake up. I was usually up already working on stuff. It was more just I liked having complete control over my own schedule. Yep. And while you actually have, in some regards, teaching, you have more control because you have, most of your week is not scheduled. You also then have the fact that every Monday at this time, you have to be in this classroom.
You have to be there. Yep.
Yeah.
And so you ended up teaching for what? Was it about 2 years?
For 2 years. Yep.
Yeah. And then you really kind of got your app going. Give people a little background of, first of all, what is your app? What kind of got you into thinking about it, and how long ago did you start working on it?
So when the iPhone 3G first came out, which is the first iPhone that had GPS on it, it was the second iPhone ever made. I was at Apple's developer conference that summer when they announced it, and immediately I wanted to build an app to take hiking and backpacking. At the time, I started to look into it and ran into a whole bunch of issues with getting the maps on there that I wanted, and I just was really busy.
And you had been passionate about backpacking a few years before that, right?
Yeah, and at the same time, at that time, there was a lot else going on in my personal life, and it just wasn't the time to work on it either. But even if I had the time, I just wasn't in a position yet to really be able to execute on that. So fast forward a number of years, I decided to go ahead and give it a try. And so I built the app. I had a number of things that I wanted the app to do. There were apps in the App Store that I was using while I was going backpacking. There was still multiple things. There was some use cases that I really wanted to tackle. But before I jumped into that, I did a lot of research just on that space. I wanted to see, could I actually get ranking in the App Store? Is there like a competitive, advantage that I could actually bring? So I saw a business model opportunity in that space that wasn't being really utilized. I saw marketing opportunities, and I also saw that I could probably get traction on the App Store. So before I jumped into it, I did some of that research. There was a ton of research I should have done that I didn't do to actually be able to, jump in and start working on a business.
Yes,
But
yes, totally.
I went ahead and just jumped in with what I like to do, which was write code. It took me quite a while to get the app done. The app itself didn't take very long. What took forever was trying to get a map. So there's a particular map that I use, or at the time used when I went backpacking, and there was no source I could license it from. So I sent a hard drive in the mail to the USGS department, which is the United States Geological Survey. And 6 weeks later, I got the hard drive back with 80,000 maps on it. And I spent most of that time trying to write code to pull all those maps together into a single unified map. And at the end, I had about 15 million map tiles that it created from that I host up on a server. Since then, I've discovered some good map sources that I also license maps from. So the app doesn't just have my own map, but I've licensed quite a few of them.
That's amazing. So how many tiles do you have total now? Do you know?
It's still the same. It's still the same number because I haven't built any new maps. I license them now.
Okay, gotcha.
I found great partners I can license from, and I pay them monthly fees based upon how much usage I get, and I use their maps.
So give people like an idea of you started this. It was about 8 years ago when you really kind of first started thinking about it. Maybe it was a little over that. Give people an idea of what your schedule looked like when you really kind of dove in and you really got started on it. And tell them about like what was exciting and what was really like a struggle for you.
So when I really got going on it, I would wake up at 4:30. I generally would spend about a half hour in devotions. Then I would work on the app for 2 hours, take a shower, and then head to my day job. And I would do that 6 days a week. Well, so on Saturday I'd head to my day job, but then Saturday morning, then my family would wake up and then we'd go on about our day.
Yep.
So I did that for almost 2 years to get the app launched. And I did it for another 2 years after that to build the business to the point where it could support our family half-time while I taught half-time. So once I started teaching, I didn't keep waking up early. Now, the one thing with that was there were days when I wouldn't wake up at 4:30. So if I just woke up one morning and it just felt like I'm not going to get through the day if I wake up, I would just give myself the freedom to go back to sleep till 6:30. And so it wasn't always 6 days a week, but I was pretty motivated and I'd get up and work on it most mornings.
So I know you talked to me a little about this, but like when you felt like kind of, even if you only had 2 hours on it, and I know not every day was productive, but in general, when you compare that to, let's say 40 hours of working at a company, there's so much like is it unproductive time? I was gonna say unproductivity. I don't know if that's a word. Unproductive time spent like in meetings, kind of transitioning from one thing to another, emails, all that kind of stuff. And I know there's been studies done, but like out of a 40-hour work week, a majority, like a big majority of that is really wasted time. And in general, I think they say people actually get 10 to 15 to 20 hours of work done in a week in a 40-hour week. I don't know what the exact stat is. I've heard varying levels, but some people say even less. So in those 2 hours, do you feel like, over a week span of time, you could almost get a full-time week's worth of work in on your own?
I could get a full week's worth of work, but I could get a lot done compared to my day job. So at that time at my day job, I was managing a team of engineers. So I had a lot of meetings and a lot of interruptions. So I also did something called productive meditation. If you've read the book Deep Work by Cal Newport, that's what he calls it. It's not meditation in a spiritual sense. It's meditation like actually thinking about problems. So while I was mowing the lawn or going for walks or going for a run, I would do all my mental work there. So when I actually sat down to write code, I would think, but I wouldn't have to do a lot of thinking. I would literally just start writing code. And so a lot of what you do as an engineer is actually thinking. So I can't actually think very well at my computer. So like even today, if I'm stuck on something, I get up and move around.
Yep.
So I don't
relate to that.
the office. Yeah. And so I would practice that. So I would do a lot of productive meditation. So I would know what to do when I sat down to write, like to actually do my coding, and then I would just pound it out. So those 2 hours were really, really productive. And it was not uncommon that I would get as much done in those 2 hours of coding as I would get done of coding at my day job. But of course, at my day job, I was also managing other engineers who were writing a lot of code as well.
Totally. So when you got to a point of you kind of went half-time with working, half-time working on the app. Well, really, you were kind of full-time teaching, though. You got to a point where you kind of projected out what you needed to fully quit your job. How was it taking that leap? Was it scary? Was it easy for you? Was it exciting? Like, how did you feel when you did that?
There was definitely some fear there. There was more fear, I think, with actually taking the job at Whitworth than there was of going full-time. Because I was leaving a very comfortable, nice job. So I've for quite a while now I've had a 3-year cash flow forecast that I run for my business, and I use that to make all decisions around anything that's going to affect the finances. And so I've gotten pretty good at being able to predict where the business is going to be, and I use that. And so I used that when I went, got a job at Whitworth. I used that when I went full time with the business. And I just run all my cash flow forecasting, and it forecasts how much will be in my bank account in 2 years and 3 years. Now, those numbers are never exactly right, but it gives me a lot more confidence doing that.
That's awesome. So, and now I know, been out for, it's been over a year now, right? That you've been away from Whitworth. Has it been almost 2 years?
No, it's been almost exactly 1 year.
It's been 1 year. Okay, that's right. So for people that are interested in kind of working on their own software, creating their own app, whatever the case may be, do you have any advice for, especially since this is more of a software type of interview, for those that are interested in starting software? Do you have any advice for those people?
Software, any business, don't pick the app you want to build or the idea you have. Pick the market you want to serve. So pick who the audience is you want to serve, and go out and start connecting with those people and let them tell you what to build.
That's very good advice. So we have a couple of viewers saying that they've asked questions, but I do not see them. Do you see any questions in the group chat?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't see any either. Viewers, I am sorry. We are going to figure this out for next time, but I'm still getting the hang of this whole live thing. So let me see. I've got the group chat open, and hopefully the audio's gotten a little better. This is kind of, this first one, there's a lot of things I know that I'll get better for the next interviews. So anyhow, I can't quite find these questions, but I will answer them in the comments after this live interview, or Stephen will answer as well. So anyhow, moving on to the next question. I kind of wanted, so we got a sense for your daily life when you were in the industry, when you were working for someone. Give people a sense of your daily life now, and kind of how you schedule things, because now everything's really in your own control. And how do you like that? What are the positives and what are the negatives of that?
Positives is I'm super self-motivated. And so I don't need somebody telling me what to do. I always have more things to do than I have time to do them. So I don't have any problem with knowing. And then also, I'm also very focused when I'm working on things. So I know what I want to work on, and I'm pretty focused on getting those things done. So that's the kind of style I like. I like having a lot of control over what I'm working on and my own schedule. My schedule varies from day to day. So 2 or 3 days, I survive about 2 days a week right now. I work from home. 3 days a week I work at a co-working space. And I really enjoy being able to do both. Co-working space is nice. It gets me out of the house. It gives me a different environment. And then of course I like working at home as well. So it depends upon the day. For me, a typical day, I usually drop my kids off at school and then go to the co-working space. So I usually get there around 8:15, 8:30. I'll typically work until 3:30 or 4, somewhere right around there. And then I usually go for a run, and the run is where I do a lot of my planning. So I don't spend my entire day in the office. So I usually work about 6.5, 7 hours sitting down at my computer. And then I go out for a walk or for a run, which is where, I guess, I do a lot of my planning. And then I'll usually also listen to some podcasts, as well as read books on building businesses, on marketing, on copywriting, on just about anything related to a business. So there's a lot of my time is spent on doing mental tasks, as well as trying to figure out, what's the right direction, what's the next step to take.
That's awesome. So, do you feel like having this sense of freedom, I know like you're very motivated. So, is it to you more exciting to get up and to work and to work on your own stuff than it was at the company? Or do you feel like it's just kind of a different kind of thing?
It's really different things. Like when I was at Olive Tree, I had a lot of the same freedom that I do now. At least I was given a lot of oversight over our product, and the engineering team and what we were working on. It wasn't that I could just make any old decision I wanted to, but I had a lot of freedom there. So I have the same thing now. I enjoy doing my own stuff a little bit better. I like working on my own things. Working for yourself has its ups and its downs. I can step away at any time. Like I don't have to get anyone's permission to walk away. At the same time, I can never fully step away because I'm ultimately responsible.
Yep.
I've got to make sure everything's covered, that things are taken care of. You can't just completely check out, that's
Totally.
hard.
So it's now 9:01, and I know you have to go pretty soon, but we'll wrap up soon. I just have a couple more questions for you. I wanted to ask you, can you tell our viewer base why programming and software is important for finance people, for actuaries, for data analysts, and people that are kind of more in my career field and that might be viewing this? Why should they be interested in technology and software?
That's probably not the best person to answer that, since that's not my area. I mean,
I can answer the question, but I just wanted to hear what your thoughts are on that.
I mean, I do all my own, like I said, cash flow forecasting, and to run the business, there's a lot of numbers that go into it. And while I don't necessarily write lots of code for that, I use a lot of logic and a lot of really basic code structure to build out my spreadsheets for it. So
Totally.
that's probably not a great answer, because that's not my world.
No, that's a good answer. I was also going to say, on my side, I've actually found that because I majored in math, I minored in computer science, and I found that in my career as an actuary, my computer science knowledge has actually come in more handy than like most of my math knowledge. My math knowledge has come in very handy for the exams. So for those who are actuaries, know there's a whole exam process, and it's very theoretical, very mathematical. So it's come in handy for that. But in terms of like my actual day-to-day work, my programming skills, I'm not an expert like Steven is. I'm not a software engineer, but I know how to do some basic hack coding, or whatever you call it. I found that to be the most helpful. And like, honestly, a lot of the projects that I've worked on are very financial related, and I've been able to automate things. And a lot of the projects over my career where I feel like I've gotten recognition, or where it's been the most enjoyable is when I've been programming. So I think it's for someone who's going into finance, someone who's going into actuarial, I personally highly recommend it, because now more than ever, and I would say in the next 20 years, we're going to see a very different kind of tool set for actuaries and for finance people. I can almost guarantee that, just with the way things are going with technology. And so I would say it's important just to have at least a base in programming. And I mean, if you look at some of the statistical languages that actuaries use, like SAS is a big one. I mean, that's something that I use on a daily basis. It's statistical in nature, but it's a programming language. So you are actually using a lot of the constructs that you would use in other base languages. So I personally think it's super important. And that's part of the reason I wanted to have Steven on as well, because like, to me, it doesn't matter what profession you're in, in this area, like actuarial, finance, data analysis, whether it's a math career. I feel like programming is so fundamental, and just to have those base skills, I think, is very important. So those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, makes sense.
And okay, to I'll ask you the final two questions before we log off here. What is your favorite hobby?
Backpacking.
I knew that was going to be the answer.
Although I spend a lot
Which
more
is
time
why you created an app for backpacking.
I spend more time mountain biking, but I like backpacking better.
Yes. By the way, Steven and I go backpacking every summer, and we had a pretty epic trip last summer planned, and we were going to go around a volcano, and it was a 7-day trip. I think we got a quarter. Was it a quarter of the way around the loop, or a third of the way?
Not even that. It was
not even that.
Epic
yeah,
fail.
And it was some of the most brutal backpacking we've done. I mean, it was bushwhacking, river crossing. I mean, it was intense, and we had to turn around.
Yeah.
But I will say his app is incredible. I mean, we were out backpacking one time, and there was a snowy area, and we couldn't find the trail. So Steven looks down. This is like years ago when he was like really kind of first getting it launched. And this is what amazed me the most. He looks down at his app and he's like, oh, it says the trail's 10 feet this way. We walked, I mean, it was about 10 feet and the trail was right there. So it was just like, it was, to me, that was when it blew me away how accurate it actually was. But, okay. So the other question I was going to ask you, of the last 5 books that you've read, what has been your favorite and why?
Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller. It's an excellent book on marketing. Probably the best book on marketing I've ever read. I'm not a marketing
expert. Has it helped you for what you've been working on too?
I haven't put any of it into practice yet. So it'll be coming, but not yet. It's nice. It's a really, I mean, it's all about clarifying. It's not just clarifying your message. It's about how you talk with your customers. So it's an excellent book.
That's awesome. So for the viewers, if they're interested in your app or some of the products you're working on, where can they go? I'll put it in the comments as well. But what's your company called?
The company's called Glacier Peak Studios. You can just Google for that. You can also find me on Twitter at Stephen L. Johnson, Stephen with a PH.
Perfect. So if you're interested, get his app. It's awesome. It's a free download, and then there's upgrades in it. So I know I use it, and if you're into the outdoors, even if like you do some basic outdoor stuff, I think it's pretty fantastic.
Thank you.
So thanks again for joining, and if you don't mind, I would love to have you on my channel later on. I know this was a bit of a struggle with the sound. I'm hoping it was okay, and I'll figure out the comments for next time, but I'm sure the viewers would love to see you again at some point.
I'd love to come back.
Awesome. Thanks for joining, and I'm out from California. Steven is out from Washington. Thanks for joining, everyone, and we will see you next time.